9:42 a.m. My inbox pinged with a brief email. Your position is no longer needed. Clear your desk by end of day. I read it 3 times, trying to believe I hadn't just had my career terminated by a few cold lines of text. No explanation, no meeting, just a cold verdict from the company's COO, the same company I'd spent over a decade protecting. But they'd just made the biggest mistake of their lives. My name is Lydia Carter, and for 11 years, I was the invisible shield protecting Orion Data Solutions from digital catastrophe. At 39, I'd built my entire adult life around this Chicago-based data analytics firm, sacrificing weekends, relationships, and my sister's wedding to keep their servers running and their secrets safe. Now, staring at that email on my monitor, I felt something crack inside me, not my spirit, but the last thread of loyalty holding me to this place. The email came from Victoria Hale, our COO, a woman who used to call me her secret weapon at company parties. No signature, no corporate letterhead, just those brutal words sent from her iPhone. The timestamp showed she'd fired me while probably sipping her morning latte at the executive floor's private cafe. I minimized the email and pulled up my latest performance review from 3 weeks ago. Exceeds expectations in all categories. Critical to organizational infrastructure. Recommended for senior leadership track. My supervisor had even handwritten a note about my unparalleled dedication during the ransomware incident. That incident, 63 straight hours of combat with hackers who'd penetrated our client portal. I'd saved $40 million in potential lawsuits and kept our biggest pharmaceutical client from jumping ship. My hands trembled as I grabbed my coffee mug, the one with "World's Okayest Employee" that the junior developers had given me as a joke last Christmas. The irony burned my throat more than the cold coffee. The elevator dinged, and I watched 2 security guards step out, heading straight for my corner office, not even the dignity of a private termination. They flanked my doorway like I was some common criminal, their faces apologetic but firm. "Ms. Carter, we need to escort you out," the younger one said, shifting uncomfortably. "You have 30 minutes to pack personal items." 30 minutes to erase 11 years. I'd spent longer than that debugging a single line of code. I stood up slowly, my mind already racing through the architecture I'd built from scratch. When I'd started here, Orion's idea of cybersecurity was a shared password written on a sticky note. I'd constructed their entire defensive infrastructure: firewalls, encryption protocols, redundancy systems, automated threat detection. I'd created a digital fortress so sophisticated that we'd won contracts specifically because clients trusted our security. My security. Did Victoria say why? I asked, though I knew they wouldn't have answers. The older guard shrugged. "Above my pay grade, ma'am. I'm sorry." I started pulling personal items from my desk, my certifications from the wall. The Crystal Award for Innovation in Cybersecurity from the Chicago Tech Alliance, photos from company retreats where I'd smiled next to Victoria, back when she was just VP of Operations and promised me I'd be integral to Orion's future. That's when I saw him through the glass partition, Ethan Cole, the new IT manager Victoria had hired 6 months ago. 29 years old with a resume that looked impressive until you realized half his experience came from his father's consulting firm. He was standing by the server room, my server room, holding a clipboard and gesturing to one of my junior team members. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. For months, Ethan had been asking for detailed documentation of our systems, claiming he needed to understand the full scope for budget planning. I'd given him the standard operating procedures, but held back the intricate details. Call it professional instinct or paranoia. Now I knew which it was. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, one of my team leads. "Ethan just announced he's taking over your responsibilities. This is BS. We all know what's happening here." What was happening was simple economics. Why pay a seasoned expert with my salary when you could hire someone at half the cost who could follow the playbook I'd written? Victoria had found her cost-cutting solution, and I was the line item being deleted. I closed my desk drawer and felt my fingers brush against something. My personal notebook, the leather-bound one where I kept handwritten notes about system configurations. Things too sensitive for digital storage. Things like the master override protocols I'd built into the system's core architecture. My insurance policy that I'd never thought I'd need. A smile tugged at my lips for the first time since 9:42 a.m., 11 years ago. I walked into Orion Data Solutions as a junior security analyst with big dreams and bigger ambitions. The company was a disaster waiting to happen. A mid-sized firm handling sensitive client data with the security infrastructure of a college dorm room. Passwords were shared via email. The server room's lock had been broken for months, and their idea of data backup was copying files to external hard drives that sat unlabeled in a supply closet. My first day, I found malware on 3 executive computers and a keylogger that had been transmitting credit card data for God knows how long. The previous IT manager had quit without notice, leaving behind a mess of outdated software and zero documentation. I remember standing in that server room, surrounded by blinking lights and tangled cables, thinking I'd made a terrible mistake taking this job. But I was young, hungry, and too stubborn to walk away from a challenge. I worked 18-hour days those first months, systematically rebuilding everything from the ground up. I implemented multi-factor authentication when most companies were still using password 123. I designed a network architecture with redundancies that would make NASA jealous. Every protocol, every firewall rule, every encryption standard, I researched, tested, and customized them specifically for Orion's needs. The ransomware attack in year 3 nearly broke me. We were 12 hours from losing everything when I discovered a vulnerability in the attacker's code. I spent 4 days straight in that server room, surviving on energy drinks and determination, manually rebuilding corrupted databases while simultaneously fending off continued attacks. When I finally emerged, victorious but exhausted, the CEO called me a hero. Victoria. Then the newly promoted VP of Operations brought me champagne. "You saved us," she'd said, tears actually glistening in her eyes. "This company owes you everything." She became my advocate after that, pushing for my promotions, defending my budget requests, ensuring I had the resources to build what I envisioned. We'd have lunch every Friday to discuss strategic planning. She'd ask my opinion on vendors, on hiring decisions, on technology investments. I thought we were building something together. I created our proprietary threat detection algorithm that identified breaches 47% faster than industry standard. I developed the automated response system that could isolate compromised segments in milliseconds. I built the client data architecture that earned us ISO certification and landed the Morrison Pharmaceutical contract, our biggest client, worth $30 million annually. Every system had my fingerprints on it. The backup protocols that ran like clockwork. The update schedules that never disrupted business hours. The security patches that installed seamlessly. I'd made myself invisible by making everything work so smoothly that people forgot the complexity underneath. But I wasn't completely naive. Working in cybersecurity teaches you paranoia as a survival skill. 3 years ago, after watching a colleague at another firm get ousted and replaced by cheaper outsourced labor, I started building in fail-safes. Nothing malicious, I'm not a criminal, just insurance. Administrative backdoors that only I knew about. Manual override commands that weren't in any documentation. A few critical processes that required specific command sequences I never wrote down, only memorized. The crown jewel was the maintenance protocol I'd embedded in the core system kernel. It was elegant in its simplicity, a dormant subroutine that would activate if certain conditions were met, forcing the entire network into protective lockdown. The only way to release it was through a specific sequence of commands that existed nowhere except in my memory. I'd tested it once, at 3 a.m. on a holiday weekend, just to make sure it worked. It did. Victoria had no idea what she'd built her empire on. She saw the beautiful interface, the smooth operations, the impressive uptime statistics. She never understood the intricate machinery beneath, the thousands of hours of customization, the delicate balance I maintained every single day. When she hired Ethan 6 months ago, she'd introduced him as someone who would complement your incredible work. His resume boasted an MBA and certifications that looked impressive to non-technical executives. But when he asked me to explain basic encryption protocols during his second week, I knew exactly what kind of compliment he was meant to be. He'd started shadowing me, taking notes on everything I did. For continuity planning, he'd said with that fake smile. Victoria had backed him up, saying documentation was crucial for a company our size, so I documented everything they needed to know to keep the lights on, but not everything they needed to know to survive a crisis. Standing in my office that morning, packing 11 years into a cardboard box, I thought about all the 2 a.m. phone calls I'd answered, all the birthdays I'd missed, all the vacations I'd canceled. I thought about the promises Victoria had made and broken. Most of all, I thought about how they believed they could simply delete me from the equation, like removing a redundant line of code. They were about to learn that I wasn't redundant. I was the keystone. 6 months before my termination, Victoria called me into her office with unusual enthusiasm. The spring sunlight streamed through her floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across her mahogany desk. She was practically glowing as she introduced Ethan Cole, who stood there in his perfectly pressed suit, extending a hand with practiced confidence. "Lydia, meet Ethan. He's joining us as IT Operations Manager," Victoria announced. "He comes highly recommended from Barrett Solutions." Barrett Solutions, his father's consulting firm. I'd done my homework the moment his resume hit my desk for review. 5 years of experience that consisted mainly of project titles with no technical substance. His LinkedIn was full of buzzwords, but empty of actual accomplishments. Still, I smiled and shook his hand, playing the team player. "Ethan will be working closely with you," Victoria continued. "I want him to understand every aspect of our infrastructure. Consider him your protégé." Protégé. The word tasted bitter even then. Ethan wasted no time inserting himself into my workflow. Every morning, he'd appear at my office with that same artificial smile and a growing list of questions. "Could you walk me through the backup protocols again? What's the logic behind this particular firewall configuration? Why did you choose this encryption method over the industry standard?" At first, I answered thoroughly, believing Victoria's story about grooming new talent. But Ethan's questions revealed a troubling pattern. He wasn't trying to understand the why behind my decisions. He wanted step-by-step instructions, like someone following a recipe without understanding how flavors worked. 3 months in, his requests became more aggressive. "I need complete documentation of all system architectures," he announced during a department meeting. "Victoria wants a full audit trail." I provided documentation, hundreds of pages detailing standard procedures, security protocols, and system overviews. But I kept the crucial details vague. The master passwords were listed as maintained by senior administrator. The emergency protocols referenced proprietary command sequences without specifying them. The backup restoration process included steps that required administrative verification without explaining what that meant. "This is incomplete," Ethan complained, sliding the documentation across my desk. "I need the actual passwords, the specific commands." "Those are compartmentalized for security reasons," I explained calmly. "No single person should have complete system access documented in one place. It's a fundamental security principle." He turned red, his composure cracking. "Victoria wants full transparency." "Then Victoria can discuss that with me directly." She never did. But I started noticing changes. My budget requests were suddenly scrutinized. My recommendations were questioned. Meetings I'd always attended were rescheduled without notice. Ethan, meanwhile, was presenting optimization strategies that were simply my ideas repackaged with corporate jargon. The breaking point came 4 months after Ethan's arrival. I was working late, debugging a client portal issue, when I heard voices from the conference room. The door was cracked, and Victoria's voice carried clearly. "His salary is a third of what we're paying her," Ethan was saying. "Once I have full documentation, we can transition smoothly." "The board will love the cost savings," Victoria replied. But we need to be careful. Lydia knows where all the bodies are buried. Not for much longer, Ethan laughed. I've got almost everything I need. Another month. Maybe 2. I stood frozen in the hallway, my laptop bag weighing heavy on my shoulder. They were discussing my termination like a foregone conclusion, like I was already gone. That night, I went home and opened my personal notebook, the one I'd never digitized. I reviewed every custom configuration, every backdoor, every failsafe I'd built into Orion's systems. Not malicious code, but protective measures. Emergency overrides that only I knew. Manual processes that weren't documented anywhere. I'd been too valuable to fire before. Now, with Ethan supposedly ready to replace me, they thought they'd found their solution. Victoria saw an opportunity to slash her department budget by replacing expertise with mediocrity. The board would praise her fiscal responsibility. She'd probably get a bonus worth more than my annual salary. Over the next 2 months, I watched Ethan shadow my every move, his phone often recording our conversations for reference. He photographed my screen during system maintenance. He borrowed my printed manuals, returning them with obvious photocopying marks. I let him document everything he could see: the surface operations, the daily routines, the standard procedures that any competent technician could follow. But the deep architecture, the emergency protocols, the command sequences that could resurrect a dead system, those lived only in my memory. The week before my termination, Ethan made his final push. I need you to create a master password list, he said, not even pretending it was a request anymore. Victoria's orders. I created one. Every password was real, current, and would grant access to exactly what it was supposed to. But they were user-level credentials, not the system-level commands that actually controlled the infrastructure. Like giving someone keys to every office but not telling them about the hidden control room in the basement. This is everything? He asked, scanning the list. Everything that's documented, I replied truthfully. He smiled that plastic smile, satisfied with his prize. 3 days later, I received my termination email. Standing in my office that final morning, watching Ethan measure the windows like he was already redecorating, I felt an odd sense of calm. He thought he had everything he needed. Victoria thought she'd orchestrated a seamless transition. They were about to learn that some things can't be copied, stolen, or replaced. Some things you have to earn. The security guards stood at my office door like executioners, checking their watches every few minutes. 23 minutes left to pack 11 years. I moved methodically, placing each item in the cardboard box with deliberate care. My industry awards. The coffee-stained mousepad I'd used since day one. The photo from the company picnic where I'd won the pie-eating contest, back when this place felt like family. Ms. Carter? The younger guard looked uncomfortable. We need to collect your keycard and company devices. I handed over my badge, the one that had opened every door in this building for over a decade. My company laptop sat closed on the desk, already wiped clean according to protocol, though they'd never know I'd done it as a courtesy, not an obligation. My phone, the one that had buzzed at all hours with emergencies only I could solve, went into his outstretched hand. Through the glass wall, I watched my team pretending to work while stealing glances at the spectacle of my removal. Marcus looked furious. Sarah from network operations was actually crying. They knew what this meant for them: longer hours, impossible demands, and Ethan's incompetence masked by their expertise. I need to speak with Victoria, I said, pulling out my personal cell phone. She's unavailable, the older guard replied, clearly rehearsed. Mr. Cole will handle any transition questions. Mr. Cole. Yesterday, he was still calling me Ms. Carter and asking for my help. Today, he was my replacement. I tried Victoria's direct line anyway. It went straight to voicemail. She'd already blocked my number. The corporate email account would be deactivated by now. 11 years of relationship reduced to digital ghost status. 5 more minutes, the guard announced. I reached for my personal notebook. the leather-bound journal that never left my desk drawer. As my fingers wrapped around it, I felt the weight of every secret it contained. This wasn't company property. I'd bought it myself, filled it with my own thoughts, my own innovations. The emergency protocols I'd designed weren't Orion's intellectual property. They were safeguards I'd created independently, never formally documented in any company system. The notebook went into my box. "What's that?" Ethan's voice cut through the silence. He'd been hovering outside, waiting for his moment to claim his conquered territory. "Personal property," I replied, not looking at him. "I'll need to verify that doesn't contain proprietary information." He reached for the notebook with the confidence of someone who'd already won. I pulled it back. "It's personal notes, grocery lists, phone numbers, nothing that concerns Orion." Victoria said, "Victoria can inspect my grocery list herself if she wants." I placed the notebook deliberately in my box. "Or she can have legal explain why she's confiscating personal property without cause." Ethan's face flushed, but he backed down. He knew I was right. And more importantly, he thought he already had everything he needed. As I lifted the box, something caught my eye, my wall calendar, still showing next week's critical maintenance window. Every third Friday, from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m., the system ran automated maintenance protocols I'd designed. Defragmentation, cache clearing, security updates, all automatic, all invisible, unless something went wrong, unless someone activated the manual maintenance override. "The system maintenance schedule," I said to Ethan, gesturing at the calendar. "You know about the Friday maintenance windows?" "Of course," he replied with practiced confidence. "All documented in your transition materials." I nodded slowly. He had no idea what he'd just confirmed, that he didn't know about the manual triggers, the override protocols that could force an emergency maintenance mode outside the scheduled windows, the ones that required specific command sequences to deactivate. The walk to the elevator felt like a funeral procession. Colleagues averted their eyes, some from shame, others from fear that association with me might mark them as the next budget cut. Only Marcus had the courage to stand up as I passed. "This is bullshit, Lydia," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Complete bullshit." "Take care of the team," I told him, knowing Ethan was listening. "They'll need it." In the elevator, I set down the box and pulled out my notebook one last time. Flipping to a specific page, I reviewed the command sequence I'd memorized but never used in production: the emergency maintenance protocol activation. 16 steps that would lock down every system, every server, every connection, forcing them into protective mode. The beauty was its legitimacy. It was a real maintenance protocol, just one that required manual intervention to resolve. The guards escorted me through the lobby, past the reception desk where I'd checked in thousands of times, out into the Chicago morning. The revolving door expelled me onto the sidewalk, like the building itself was rejecting an organ transplant. "I'm sorry about this," the younger guard said quietly. "Everyone knows it's wrong." I looked back at the gleaming tower, at the windows of the executive floor where Victoria was probably already celebrating her budget victory, at the server room windows where Ethan was likely standing, surveying his new kingdom. "Sometimes wrong decisions have right consequences," I said, more to myself than to him. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my personal phone and opened a secure terminal app, one connected to my home server, not Orion's network. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard. I could activate the protocol now, throw them into immediate chaos, but that would be emotional, sloppy, traceable. No. Let them think they'd won. Let Ethan settle into his new role. Let Victoria report her cost savings to the board. Let them get comfortable. The emergency maintenance protocol had a beautiful feature I'd built in. It could be scheduled for delayed activation, triggered by specific system conditions. Like, for instance, the next time someone tried to run a routine server update without the proper authentication sequence. I closed the app and put the phone away. Ethan was meticulous about following documentation. He'd definitely run the standard Friday updates. He'd follow every step in the manual exactly as written. He just wouldn't know about the steps that weren't written anywhere. 3 days passed in careful preparation. I sat in my home office, surrounded by multiple monitors displaying various system dashboards, all legitimate access points I'd maintained through my personal development servers. Nothing that violated any laws or agreements. Just watching public-facing metrics, server response times, traffic patterns, the same information any client could access. Wednesday night. I opened my secure terminal and began typing. The beauty of the emergency maintenance protocol was that it wasn't a hack or malware. It was a legitimate system function I'd built to protect Orion's infrastructure during critical threats. A dead man's switch of sorts, designed to lock down everything if specific conditions indicated a catastrophic breach. The protocol lay dormant in the kernel, waiting for the right trigger. All I had to do was arm it. My fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision. First, I accessed the development server I still maintained, the one I'd used for testing new security measures. It was registered under my personal LLC, completely separate from Orion's infrastructure but with legitimate API connections for testing purposes. Connections that Ethan didn't even know existed because they predated his arrival by 8 years. I initiated a simple diagnostic query, the kind that ran thousands of times daily across the network. But this one contained a specific packet sequence, a digital knock on a door only I knew existed. The system acknowledged with a brief spike in CPU usage that would look like normal fluctuation to anyone monitoring. The trap was set. The next time someone initiated a server update without the proper authentication sequence, a 32-character string that existed only in my memory, the system would interpret it as a potential breach and lock down everything. Thursday morning, I made myself breakfast and checked LinkedIn. Ethan had already updated his profile. Senior Director of Technology Infrastructure at Orion Data Solutions. Victoria had posted about exciting organizational optimizations and leveraging fresh perspectives for enhanced efficiency. The corporate speak made me nauseous. My phone buzzed. Marcus texting from his personal number. Ethan's already fucked up twice today. Had to restore from backup because he deleted active user sessions. This is a disaster. I didn't respond. Any communication could be construed as interference. Friday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I knew Ethan's schedule. He'd sent out a department-wide email announcing his new optimization protocols, including moving the routine server updates to peak business hours to minimize overtime costs. The update was scheduled for 2 p.m., right when system load would be highest. I positioned myself at a coffee shop across from Orion's building, laptop open, watching public server metrics. At 1:47 p.m., I saw the first signs, a decrease in response times indicating pre-update preparation. Ethan was following the manual exactly. 1:55 p.m., cache clearing initiated. 1:58 p.m., user sessions being archived. 2:1 p.m., update protocol beginning. I watched the exact moment it happened. The server response metrics flatlined, not gradually, not with warning, instant and complete system paralysis. Every service, every connection, every process frozen in protective lockdown. My phone exploded with notifications from former colleagues texting variations of WTF just happened. I ignored them all except one from Marcus. Everything's dead, Ethan's turning white. Victoria just ran down here screaming. The public status page for Orion's client portal updated. Temporary maintenance in progress. Services will resume shortly. Except they wouldn't. Not without the override codes. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I could imagine the scene. Ethan frantically checking his documentation, running through every troubleshooting procedure, while angry client calls flooded the service desk. Victoria demanding answers. The board members starting to notice. The pharmaceutical client whose portal handled millions in daily transactions growing increasingly furious. At 3:15 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. But I recognized Orion's conference room line. Hello? Lydia? Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. I need your help. The system's locked and... I'm sorry. Who is this? I asked calmly. It's Ethan Cole from Orion. Oh, the company that fired me via email, without explanation, after 11 years of service? Silence. Then, muffled conversation in the background. Lydia, please. A different voice now. Victoria? We have a situation. You have a situation, I corrected. I have a cup of coffee and a nice book. This is sabotage. Is it? Because from what I understand, your new senior director of technology infrastructure should be handling infrastructure issues, unless he's not qualified for the position? More muffled discussion. I heard someone mention legal action and almost laughed. I don't have authorized access to your systems anymore, I continued. You revoked it Monday, remember? I couldn't help even if I wanted to, which I don't. What do you want? Victoria's mask finally slipped, revealing the desperation underneath. Want? I wanted 11 years of loyalty to mean something. I wanted a conversation before being discarded. I wanted basic professional respect. I paused, sipping my coffee for effect. But what I want now is for you to figure out your own problems. You've got everything documented, right? Ethan has all my transition materials. You know damn well. I know you made a business decision. Now you're dealing with the business consequences. Good luck. I hung up and powered off my phone completely. The coffee shop's Wi-Fi showed Orion's services still flatlined. Their stock price had already started dropping, a 3% decline in 45 minutes. By 4 p.m., local tech news had picked up the story. Major data firm experiences catastrophic system failure. By 5 p.m., it was trending on Twitter. Orion down. I finished my coffee, packed up my laptop, and walked to my car. As I drove past Orion's building, I saw employees streaming out, sent home because without the network, there was nothing they could do. Several news vans had already arrived. At home. I turned my phone back on to find 47 missed calls and twice as many texts. I ignored them all and opened my notebook to the page with the override sequence. 32 characters that could end their nightmare. The protocol would hold for exactly 72 hours before automatic failsafes released it, a feature I'd built to prevent permanent lockdown from killing the company entirely. That gave them the weekend to sweat, to lose millions in revenue, to watch their reputation crumble. Then they could try again to reach me. And this time, the conversation would happen on my terms. Saturday morning brought a thunderstorm that matched the tempest surely raging inside Orion's executive boardroom. I'd turned my phone back on to find 186 missed calls. The voicemails progressed from professional to desperate to threatening and back to desperate again. At 9 a.m. sharp, Victoria called again. This time, I answered. Lydia, we need to resolve this professionally, she began, her voice carefully controlled. Professionally? Like terminating someone via email after 11 years? That was a miscommunication in process. We can discuss severance. I don't want severance. I want a consulting contract. Silence stretched between us. I could hear her breathing, calculating. What are your terms? $60,000 per month, 6-month minimum contract, paid up front, plus a $30,000 emergency service fee for this specific incident. That's extortion. That's market rate for emergency infrastructure consulting. Ask around. Oh wait, you can't? Your systems are down. The board will approve anything to stop losing $3 million per day. Morrison Pharmaceuticals called you yet? I heard they have penalty clauses for service interruptions exceeding 24 hours. The silence told me everything. Morrison had definitely called. Even if we agree, Victoria said slowly, you don't have system access anymore. I'll need temporary consultant credentials, full administrative privileges, non-disclosure agreements on both sides, and the contract signed before I touch anything. This is Saturday. Legal isn't. Then you'd better call them in. The clock's ticking. 54 hours until the automatic failsafe releases. But by then, your reputation will be destroyed. How's the stock price looking? I knew exactly how it looked, down 11% in after-hours trading. Tech blogs were speculating about ransomware. Competitors were circling like sharks, ready to poach panicking clients. "I'll call you back," Victoria said through gritted teeth. 2 hours later, she called again. "The board approved your terms. Legal is drafting the contract now. Send it to my attorney for review." I gave her the contact information for the lawyer I'd retained Thursday afternoon, anticipating this moment. "We need this resolved today." "Then you'd better hope the contract is clean." "Oh, and Victoria, I want the first payment processed before I step foot in the building. Wire transfer. No checks." By 3 p.m., the contract was signed. By 4 p.m., $90,000 had hit my account. By 5 p.m., I was walking back into Orion's building, this time escorted by Victoria herself, who looked like she'd aged 5 years in 5 days. The server room was chaos. Ethan sat surrounded by manual printouts, 3 laptops, and empty energy drink cans. His shirt was untucked, his perfect hair disheveled, his confidence shattered. When he saw me, his face cycled through relief, shame, and resentment. "I've tried everything," he said without preamble. "Every protocol, every override in the documentation." "Move," I said simply. He scrambled aside. I sat at the primary terminal, my fingers finding their home on the keyboard. Around me, Victoria, Ethan, and half the IT department watched in desperate anticipation. I opened a command prompt and began typing. Not the override sequence, not yet. First, I ran diagnostics, checking system integrity, making a show of investigating the problem I'd created. "Interesting," I murmured, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The system triggered an emergency lockdown protocol. Were you running updates without proper authentication?" "I used the credentials in the documentation," Ethan protested. "The user credentials, yes, but not the system-level authentication sequence." I turned to Victoria. "This is a critical security feature. It prevents unauthorized system modifications, even from internal threats. Didn't Ethan review this with you?" Victoria's glare at Ethan could have melted steel. I turned back to the terminal and began entering the override sequence. 32 characters, typed slowly enough for everyone to see but too quickly for anyone to memorize. The system responded immediately. Processes unfreezing, services spinning back to life. Within 10 minutes, everything was operational. The collective sigh of relief was audible. "I'll need to implement some additional protocols," I announced. "To prevent future incidents. That's what you're paying me for, right?" Victoria nodded stiffly. "Whatever you need." I spent the next 3 hours implementing safeguards, actually just documenting the systems properly, creating real redundancies that Ethan could understand. But I made sure everyone saw me working, saw Ethan frantically taking notes, saw the difference between competence and whatever he'd been selling. As I prepared to leave, Marcus caught me in the hallway. "That was beautiful," he whispered. "Absolutely beautiful." "I don't know what you mean," I replied with a slight smile. Walking past Victoria's office, I knocked on the door frame. She looked up from her computer, where she was probably calculating how much my contract would cost versus the lawsuits they'd avoided. "I'll be working remotely for the remainder of my contract," I informed her. "Available for emergencies, of course, at my consulting rate." "Lydia." "Oh, and Ethan should probably shadow me for the full 6 months. He has a lot to learn." "Unless you're planning to replace him with someone qualified?" Her jaw tightened, but she nodded. We both knew she couldn't fire him now. It would be admitting her mistake too publicly. I left the building for the second time that week, but this time on my own terms. The storm had passed, leaving the evening air clean and sharp. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Heard about Orion's troubles. Also heard you're available for consulting. Interested in a conversation? CTO, Nexus Systems. Orion's biggest competitor." I screenshotted the message. It might be useful when contract renewal discussions came around. The call came at 11 p.m. Saturday night, just as I was pouring myself a well-earned glass of wine. Victoria again. But this time her voice had lost all pretense of control. Morrison is threatening to pull their entire contract, she said without preamble. They want assurance this won't happen again. They want to speak with whoever fixed it. That would be your consultant, I replied smoothly. I assume my hourly rate applies for client relations? Lydia. I'll take the call. Send me their contact. My consulting rate for emergency client retention is double the standard rate. Double? It's almost midnight on a Saturday. Victoria. Emergency hours. Unless you'd prefer Ethan handle the call? The sharp intake of breath told me everything. I'll authorize it. Sunday morning, I had a video conference with Morrison's CTO and their entire security team. They grilled me for 2 hours about the incident, the fix, and preventive measures. I answered with a kind of technical depth that had once made me indispensable, carefully implying, without stating, that the problem arose after my departure. So you're back with Orion? Morrison's CTO asked pointedly. I'm consulting for 6 months, ensuring smooth transitions and system stability. And after 6 months? That depends on Orion's commitment to infrastructure integrity. The subtext was clear: keep me, or lose your biggest client. Monday morning brought new chaos. The weekend incident had attracted attention from every major client. My phone rang constantly with Victoria, begging me to take calls, join meetings, reassure nervous executives. Each interaction was billable at emergency rates. By Wednesday, I'd logged 43 billable hours at double rate. The single week had earned me more than my monthly salary used to be. Thursday afternoon. Victoria called me into the office. A request, not a demand. The board wants to discuss a permanent arrangement, she said, sitting across from me in the conference room where she'd once planned my termination. I'm under contract for 6 months. We'd like to discuss what happens after that. I leaned back, savoring the moment. What happened to cost optimization? Ethan's salary is a third of what mine was, remember? Victoria's face darkened. That was a miscalculation. No, it was a calculation, just a bad one. I pulled out my phone, showing her the message from Nexus Systems. I have options, Victoria. What are you offering? Your previous position, with a 20% raise. I laughed, actually laughed. My previous position, the one where I was fireable by email? No, thank you. Then what do you want? Chief Security Officer, reporting directly to the CEO, not you. Salary of $300,000, plus bonuses tied to system uptime, full autonomy over security decisions. And Ethan transfers to a different department. That's substantial. That's non-negotiable. Oh. And I wanted in writing that any termination requires board approval and 6 months' notice. Both ways. Victoria's knuckles were white as she gripped her pen. I'll present it to the board. Friday morning, exactly 1 week after my termination, I received the offer. Everything I'd asked for, plus a signing bonus to recognize the critical nature of your expertise. I signed it in the same conference room where Ethan had once planned my replacement, using the same pen Victoria had used to authorize my termination paperwork. There's one more thing, I said as Victoria countersigned. Ethan needs to formally apologize, to me, and to the entire IT department he almost destroyed. It's not in the contract, no. But it's the right thing to do. The team needs to see that competence matters more than cost-cutting. That afternoon, Ethan stood before the assembled IT department, his prepared statement shaking in his hands. I want to apologize for the disruption my inexperience caused. I underestimated the complexity of the systems Lydia built and maintained. I'm grateful for her expertise in resolving the crisis I created. The words tasted like ash in his mouth, I could tell, but he said them. As the meeting dispersed, Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. Welcome back, Chief. Thanks, but I never really left. I held up my notebook, the one that had started everything. I just took a brief intermission, Victoria passed by, headed for the elevator. She paused, turning back. You planned this. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I planned for contingencies. You planned for cost savings. We both got what we planned for. She left without another word. But we both knew the truth. She'd tried to delete me from the equation, treating me like an expendable line item. Instead, she'd learned that some people aren't costs to be cut. Their foundations holding everything together. The irony was delicious. In trying to save money, she'd ended up paying me far more. In trying to replace me with someone cheaper, she'd proven I was irreplaceable. In trying to fire me quietly, she'd made my value visible to everyone. 6 months later, I stood in my corner office, larger than my old one, with a view of Lake Michigan, reviewing Orion's security metrics. System uptime, 99.97%. Client satisfaction, highest in company history. Stock price, up 34% since my return. My desk phone rang. Victoria's extension. But I knew it wasn't her calling. She'd submitted her resignation 3 months after my promotion, taking a position at a startup that promised her the CEO role she'd always craved. The board had accepted it with what seemed like relief. Carter here, I answered. Lydia, it's James Morrison. The CEO of Morrison Pharmaceuticals himself. I wanted to personally thank you for the seamless integration of our new security protocols. Our board is impressed. Just doing my job, James. Well, you do it exceptionally. We're actually expanding our tech infrastructure. Any chance you know someone as good as you who might be looking? I glanced through my office window at the IT floor below, where Marcus now led a team twice the size of before, each member handpicked and properly compensated. I might know someone. Let me make some calls. After hanging up, I pulled out my leather notebook, the same one that had saved my career. Inside, next to the emergency protocols I'd never need to use again, I'd started a new list. Talented professionals who'd been undervalued by their companies, ready for opportunities they deserved. Ethan had lasted 2 months after my return before quietly resigning. Last I heard, he was working at his father's consulting firm, probably inflating his resume with his experience managing critical infrastructure at a major data firm. I wished him well, sort of. Everyone needs to find their level of competence. My computer chimed with a calendar reminder, weekly team lunch. Something I'd instituted to build the culture Victoria had tried to destroy with her cost-cutting. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Another recruiter, another offer, another company that had heard about the Orion incident and wanted to ensure they had someone irreplaceable. I archived it without responding. I'd already won my game. The server room hummed quietly as I passed it on my way to lunch. Those servers, my servers, ran smoothly now with proper documentation, real redundancies, and a team that understood their value. The emergency protocol I'd used still existed in the system's core, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. A reminder that expertise has value, that loyalty should be reciprocated, that treating people as expendable often proves who's really expendable. The early autumn sun streamed through the windows as I joined my team in the conference room, the same one where Victoria had once plotted my removal. Now it hosted laughter, collaboration, and the kind of innovative thinking that only comes from people who feel secure and valued. Hey, Chief, Marcus called out. Tell them about the time you locked down the entire company. That's classified, I replied with a smirk, taking my seat at the head of the table. Sarah from Network Operations leaned forward conspiratorially. Come on, we all know you did something. The way Ethan looked that day, like he'd seen a ghost. Sometimes, I said, unwrapping my sandwich. The best security systems are the ones people don't even know exist. And sometimes, the most valuable employees are the ones companies don't appreciate until they're gone. The room fell quiet for a moment, everyone understanding the deeper meaning. But enough about the past, I continued, pulling up my tablet. Let's talk about the future. Morrison wants to triple their data throughput. I'm thinking we build something revolutionary. Something that'll make what we have now look like stone tablets. The energy in the room shifted, eyes lighting up with the excitement of a new challenge. This was what I'd fought for. Not just my job, but the ability to build, to innovate, to work with people who shared my passion for excellence. As the discussion turned technical, ideas flying across the table, I thought about that morning 6 months ago when I'd received that cold email. 9:42 a.m. My career apparently over. But careers, like systems, can be rebooted if you hold the right commands. Victoria had thought she was optimizing costs. Instead, she'd optimized me right into the position I deserved all along. She'd tried to delete a senior security expert and ended up creating a chief security officer. She'd attempted to save a few $100,000 and ended up costing the company millions. Not just in emergency consulting fees, but in the lesson learned. The meeting ran long, as our meetings always did now. Everyone too engaged to watch the clock. As we finally wrapped up, I stayed behind, standing by the window that overlooked the city. Somewhere out there, in gleaming towers just like this one, other executives were making the same mistake Victoria had made, viewing expertise as expense, treating people as spreadsheet cells, planning to replace knowledge with keywords. They'd learn, eventually, the hard way or the harder way. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Ms. Carter, I'm the CTO at Infinity Systems. We're having some infrastructure challenges and heard about your consulting work. Would you be interested in a conversation? I smiled, typing back, I'm fully committed to Orion, but thank you for reaching out. Good luck with your challenges. Then I added, and a word of advice, value the experts you already have. It's cheaper than learning what happens when they're gone. I hit send and pocketed my phone. The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Below, the evening shift was arriving, the building's pulse continuing as it had for decades. But in the server room, in the quantum maze of circuits and code, my signature remained. Not as a trap or a threat, but as a promise. I am irreplaceable not because I made myself necessary, but because I made everything better. Victoria had sent me away with an email. I'd returned with a crown. Thank you all for listening to my story of corporate karma and sweet revenge. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served cold in the server room, please subscribe to the channel and share your own thoughts about workplace justice. Have you ever had a moment where your true value became undeniable? I'd love to hear about it in the comments.